The doctor needs to have some level of trust in the patient, but what the DOJ has accomplished, they've instilled the fear of God, so they're not prescribing.
With the most gentle and kind DEA agents, right, Juan?
I was speaking with our agent friend yesterday, and you came up, but yeah, that's right.
Oh, I bet I did. Law group from the beautiful Miami office with us. Hello, Juan.
Hi, how are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks for asking. And we've got the wonderful Claudia Morendi from the Don't Punish Pain rally with us as well. How are you, Claudia?
Hi, Ron. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining us today. And where are you in quarantine right now, Claudia?
I'm in Providence, Rhode Island.
Wonderful. How's the weather out there?
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I've just been getting more vitamin D. Like we were just talking, it's time to stimulate the economy. TJ Maxx is open and I'll be stimulating the economy today.
Nice.
Fantastic. Now, just a bit of background for everybody. Claudia is the president, right, of the Don't Punish Pain Rally, an organization that's devoted to ensuring that chronic pain patients have an advocate, not only in the legislature, various state legislatures, but also on the national level and the media level. And first, I'd just like to say, Claudia, your mission was well needed for a very long time. While doctors have their voice through their counsel, pain patients were sort of left unheard, and I think you met a very important need. But with that, Claudia, tell us about your organization, what you do, and how you help pain patients.
So 3 years ago, I went on social media and I announced I was going to organize a national protest for pain patients because the 2016 C guidelines, really created mayhem in the medical community. And, in my mind, I'm thinking one rally, but before you know it, we had 46, 47 planned. And I started with 5 members. There's over 10,000. And we organize rallies throughout the country for pain patients who have been left as collateral damage because their doctors have been targeted. Doctors are fearful to prescribe. So my advocacy started organizing these rallies. And then I was kind of pushed into the box with the doctors. And now my energies are, finding doctors legal counsel, talking them into getting compliance before they run into an issue with the DEA or the medical boards, and protect them. My mission right now is to protect every prescriber and continue to build a base of compassionate doctors who are willing to treat some of the sickest people in the country. And between all of that, I've been able to get legislation sponsored in Rhode Island, which passed the House unanimously. And my legislation has been taken into other states because that was the goal, get some, not boilerplate, but something addressing chronic intractable pain. And it's, I was supposed to hit the Senate, but COVID happened. And I feel pretty good. I think 2021, it should pass unanimously. But
very good.
It's been a fight every day. It's a fight every day. And now that I'm involved with the doctors, it's a whole nother, my patient stories never kept me awake at night, but the doctors, I have a strict rule. I never take calls after 5:30 because I'm a little high strung. And I hear the doctors' stories and I was like, oh, are you kidding me? So just when I hear one crazy story, the DEA rating them, and they work in tandem with the state medical boards, another one comes rolling in. And now the doctors call me and they say, I can't sleep, Claudia. I'm sick to my stomach. I'm having nightmares that the DEA is going to come in. And, I'm like, do you have a lawyer? That's my first, who's your lawyer? And I reached out to Ron maybe under a year ago, and Ron got right back to me. I like Ron, but I want to see lawyers win. And, it's time to find, I call them rats, the people that testify against these really good doctors, and then we find these rats with no pain management background, and then the rats testify against Ron, as you said, well-intentioned physicians, and then before I know it, I've got another few thousand patients who don't have doctors, and now they're going to be forced to hit the streets, and they're going to overdose on whatever the cartel is bringing in. So it's just this hamster wheel that never ends.
So I've got a few questions based off that, Claudia, and thank you so much. First things first, when people want to find out about you, where do they go?
So they can, so the main page, we've got 50 pages on Facebook. The main rally page is Don't Punish Pain Rally, and that's on Facebook. And then I've created 50 state pages, so you can organize within your own state page. But then if people need to hire an advocate, they can find me at thedoctorpatientforum.com, and they can click help, submit a form, and we do our best to advocate, whether it's going over images or just placing them with the doctor.
And thank you for that. And the thing that comes to my mind when I hear you speak is that, in some sense, a doctor's failures in compliance or in following what the DEA is expecting of them, of course, these rules are very shifting and difficult to figure out, but a doctor's failure to adhere to that seems to have a very negative impact on your constituents, your primary constituents, the patient population. So what would you say out there to the doctors who, you know, don't have a lawyer, don't have a compliance program, are just sitting down with patients and prescribing, but aren't really paying attention to rules and requirements and regulations? What do you say to those physicians?
Well, first and foremost, I say, don't get an attorney that's writing wills during the day. And you mentioned that in our podcast a few weeks ago. But most importantly, you know, I had this discussion with you. I want to buy a pain management center. But then after I spoke with you, I said, this is dangerous, because right now I am exercising my right, freedom of speech, and I've got a big mouth. But if I become an investor, what's going to happen? So I tell my doctors, why wouldn't you bring a compliance officer in to be sure you're following the protocol, even though the protocol is very shady? Because, you know, we've taken those CDC regulations and we've turned them into law. But if I was practicing, I would not only have a compliance program set up, I would want to know that I would want to be able to prescribe safely, but prepared for the worst. So what's happening now is the doctor's like, well, forget it. If I have to pay to do A, B, C, and D, I'm just not going to prescribe. And that's where we are. We probably only have 10,000 prescribers in the country. So get a compliance program in. I mean, you're paying for peace of mind.
Yeah. That's a shame. I think we probably have over 20 million pain patients in this country, and maybe lesser in chronic pain, but certainly the need is not being met, similar to the number of Suboxone doctors out there. So the next thing, what rule or regulation or idea has been most damaging to the pain patients of this country over the last 10 or 15 years?
The 2016 CDC guidelines, by far. Those were created with some addiction specialists, big backers of Suboxone. They were created in secret. The FDA had no knowledge until those guidelines were released, and the CDC had no business creating guidelines addressing prescribing. They're supposed to focus on disease. So they said, well, we're focusing on the disease of addiction, but they lumped in pain patients into addicts. And now that I'm working with addicts, I can 100% say with certainty, my IV heroin users are not in the same group as my 75-year-old spinal stenosis patients. So the group, those CDC guidelines need to be rewritten with pain management specialists, not addiction. But, a lot of doctors think because they're prescribing Suboxone, they're safe. But that's not the case. Suboxone doctors are getting targeted just as much as doctors who were prescribing FDA-approved opioids like OxyContin, oxycodone. And I just spoke with a psychiatrist, and he said, He said, oh, he said to the FBI agent, I'm the good guy. And I said, what did you mean? You're the good guy. He said, well, I said, I prescribe Suboxone. I said, I don't understand. You're a good guy as opposed to a bad guy prescribing oxycodone, but that Suboxone will be diverted much more than that oxycodone. So it's bizarre how the doctors think, but I don't think doctors are business savvy individuals. I think these are analytical thinkers. They're medicine men, right? And when you discuss the law and compliance and attorney, they shut down. So that was one of the main reasons I called you to begin with. Like, let's bring the two together so we can get patients the care that they need. Because if nobody's willing to prescribe, then I'll have 30 million suicides, because that's what's happening.
Step one, we've got to remove the fear, right? I mean, it seems based on what you're saying and some of what I've experienced, physicians are reluctant to prescribe opiates, not because they believe patients don't need them, but because they're simply afraid of how they may look for prescribing opiates to the federal government. And I think that fear, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that fear is because of lack of knowledge of how they're supposed to appropriately prescribe, and some of the fear that's been generated by the CDC guidelines. Let me give you an example about irrational fear. The CDC guidelines are really bad, right? But the one thing that people fail to understand, well, two things people fail to understand about the CDC guidelines. Number one, they specifically in the first paragraph or first page say that they do not apply to pain management physicians. They actually only apply to primary care physicians. And number two, the MME, minimum threshold dosages, were only supposed to be sort of risk stratification devices to determine that if you're over a certain MME, you should consider alleviating some of the risk by increasing compliance. Instead of reading those guidelines for what they were supposed to be, and they were still damaging even if you read them the way you were supposed to, physicians lumped them all in together. They said, I need to cut off every patient above 90 MME, right? So they start cutting people across the board and they start cutting them down. And then they stop treating patients for chronic pain altogether in their primary care practice. Now, when that happened in this country, there were not enough specific pain management patients to take those patients on. And so every single one of those patients went to a doctor who never read the CDC guidelines, who wasn't up to date on their medicine, and had pain patients now flooding into their office, which was ripe for prosecution. And that's how we end up with all of these, 75 to 85-year-old doctors who haven't been to med school in a very long time, who see opiates the way that Purdue Pharma used to see them back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and we're prescribing according to the old guidelines and not the new ones. And that was the powder keg for sort of the war on opiates. But I know that you're the one being interviewed here, but this is just a very, very interesting discussion point for how we got into this mess. Now, the one thing that I think that we're all lacking here in the ability to appreciate is what the perspective is like for that chronic pain patient. Without divulging specific stories, I don't really need you to get into that, but what is it like for those folks who are out there who can't find a doctor that out of fear can't find a doctor that is willing to prescribe to them?
Well, I'm a pain patient. I spent 12 years in the hospital with Crohn's disease. So I ran my court reporting agency from the hospital. I raised my kids, but the reason I fell into this role is because I was sick of being treated like a drug seeker. And when I would go to the hospital, they're like, oh, what's wrong, Claudia? You're back again. But yeah, I've got a colostomy bag, so things happen in life, and I don't have an immune system. But, the role of a pain patient is, first you have to find a doctor. And that doctor is, as soon as you walk in that door, you are guilty in that doctor's mindset, because he doesn't know, am I getting an addict? Am I getting a pain patient? Because doctors don't learn a whole lot about pain management in medical school, maybe 6 hours, right? So now it's the dance. So you have to say enough, but don't say too much, because you don't want to become a complicated patient. But these doctors actually put out, well, you can come to see us, but we don't prescribe opioids. Well, you're a pain management center. What do you do? Like, how many injections do you offer these people? So if you're able to find a doctor, right? It's, you have to start, well, first we have to try antidepressants because the pain's all in your head. You probably, we're going to try antidepressants, then we're going to try Suboxone. No. I don't want Suboxone. I don't want antidepressants. I don't need steroid injections. And it's this game, but it's, the patient is left feeling so defeated. So if you're able to find a doctor, then you have to make your way over to the pharmacy. And if you're getting greater than 90 MME, chances are the pharmacist is not going to fill it. And you have to drive 200 miles to find a pharmacy who's going to fill it. So not only do you have the angst leading up to the visit, but you have the angst of going to the pharmacy and then only to be sold, oh, Blue Cross isn't covering it. Oh, you're in Oregon. They decided anybody with Medicaid doesn't need opioids. So those 2016 C guidelines have created the pain patient death movement. That's how I refer to it. These people are already sick. Like I fight, Ron, so I've been sick my whole life, but people right now with COVID, the healthy people, you're getting a dose of my life, of my community's life, but we're used to this life. Now the fight for the hydroxychloroquine or whatever it's called. So now you're seeing, oh, I've got to fight for medication. I've got to fight to get tested. But the life of a pain patient has come to a screeching halt, and we have to resurrect the pain management practice, and we have to protect the doctors who are willing to treat these very sick people. And there's some great doctors out there, and they call me and they say, Claudia, I want to prescribe, but I'm so afraid. And that's when I said, well, bring some compliance in. Sit down with the attorney. There's got to be some type of protection if you have compliance in. How safe am I from the DEA? And it's not only the DEA, it's the unscrupulous medical boards, Ron, right? I mean, they're just as low down as the DOJ and the DEA. So the life of a pain patient, it's bad. It is very scary for these people. My veterans with no limbs, they had to choose between their benzos or their pain medication. So, I mean, I advocated for a woman. She had both, double amputee. She serves the country, and she comes back, and the VA says, I can't prescribe both. You have to pick one. And she said, well, I can't, my anxiety. Well, try some antidepressants. Pick one. What means more, your pain or your anxiety? This is disgusting.
Claudia, I'd love to get, it's absolutely terrible. I'd love to get Juan's perspective on this, because as a compliance attorney, specifically down in sort of the hard-hit DEA area of Miami, may have some tips for some of those providers out there that are scared to prescribe and treat some of that population. Juan, what's the status down there? What can folks do to protect themselves?
All right. So first, I want to put some context and go to the root of the problem, right? And the problem, obviously, is the federal government and politics, right? When the explosion of cases involving Purdue Pharma, right? There were some bad apples. There's always bad apples in any industry. But what the federal government did, because of the pressure, the political pressure they were facing, and a lot of people that were dying, and most of the people that are dying are kids. Basically, they're still in the medication from their parties, etc., and becoming addicted that end up taking heroin. It's not the people that really need it. So it's typical for the federal government to, in a year, without doing the research that they need to do, without talking with specialists, without celebrating many public hearings, etc., calling the CDC guys, hey, come up with something. And then the federal government, the DEA, the FBI, everybody, they go straight to enforcement, right? Instead of going into prevention, basically, let's penalize everybody. We have to put a stop of it, because either Trump is going to lose the election or the mayor is going to lose the election. So we have to go to the root of the problem. There were some bad apples, and because of the political pressure, basically, they ended up penalizing the good persons that really need this type of medication, right? So in Miami, it's not only the physicians that are having problems, pharmacies also, right? Mm-hmm. So like you were saying, Claudia, when a doctor feels like, and they have pain management clinics, that this person really needs to basically have pain medication, I have many of my clients that call me, it's like, Juan, this patient needed, he went to CVS Caremark and they don't want to dispense the medication. I have to send letters to CVS Caremark, say, listen, we're going to sue you, etc. CVS Caremark, obviously, they either don't reply and then going after CVS Caremark or Walgreens. They basically, either the patient or the doctor don't have that money to fight, right? So the most important thing that physicians need to know is basically compliance. And like you were saying, Claudia, people, I don't know why, they're afraid of compliance, right? What the government is looking for, right, and or the DEA, etc., is for the doctor to do a medical evaluation. And the most important thing for the doctors is to have medical records and or evidence to substantiate the problem, right? So yeah, if I go into an accident, I break my L1 vertebrae or whatever, hey, get a copy of that x-ray, put that x-ray in the medical record, that's the evidence. Meet with the patient at least 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Get a HIPAA release from the patient, from his other doctors. Get the records, review everything. Also extremely important is to look and evaluate how that patient is doing, right? If we give you 30 oxycodones a month and you come at day 20 and you need 30 more, hey, wait a second. Let's go ahead. Let's do another medical evaluation. Let's do an additional testing to see what's going on. Maybe I can give you more, lower dosage, right? What the DA looks for immediately is the amount of pain medication you're prescribing a month. Many of my bad apples clients were prescribing 200 a month of oxycodone 60 or 30. It's not that that is illegal or that is not correct, but it's something that if you're doing that, you have to be aware that if they come to investigate you, you better have those medical records and you better substantiate why that patient needs that amount of medication, right? For example, I had one in the DA that was fighting. We went and looked at the patient. He was a cancer patient, right? So she needed more medication. Each case you have to evaluate separately, but the most important thing is record keeping. Record keeping, when the DEA, the FBI raids a physician office, what they're looking basically, first of all, are going to be the medical records of those patients that you're dispensing the medication. If your medical record look good, right? You know, basically you're not going to have a problem. Or if the government wants to come after you and you get Ron or I or any healthcare attorney, we have our evidence, right? That we're going to use as leverage against the government to dismiss the case. The other important thing that I think is extremely unfair to physician healthcare providers is that once you get into trouble, it becomes a domino effect. This country was made because of, you shouldn't have double jeopardy. You shouldn't be penalized for the same violation over and over and over. So when you have a doctor that is doing things correctly or doing things fine, or you have one that is basically a bad apple that is doing or violated the rules or regulations, at the end of the day, what you have to look at is, hey, am I doing things right? Am I doing things correctly? Do I think with my medical background that there is a medical necessity to prescribe that pain management, that pain medication to that patient? So it's extremely important. Record keeping is one of the first things that the DEA look at. The other issue is that this, from 2013 on, and I think 2015, it carried on. And Ron was saying this, many of these people are not attorneys, so they're physicians. So they pass CDC guidelines, or Ron and I, which deal with pharmacy DEA red flags, right? Now, after I don't know how many years, when somebody's going to purchase a pharmacy or you're the owner of a pharmacy, they give you a seminar. Beautiful. Prevention. Explain what you should look for. Right? If you see a patient that's coming to the office, he's sweating, he looks kind of like, you know, that has a problem, or so all of that training and prevention is really good, but they don't inform the physicians and or the pharmacists for that matter. Hey, listen, this is what we're looking for. What they do is they issue a subpoena, they issue a search warrant. You didn't follow the CDC guideline. Well, the CDC guideline, I didn't even know that they came out. Red flags. Red flag and guidelines and red flags are not rules and regulations. It's not law. They're not issued by Congress, right? So there's some guideline, there's some red flag. If you don't go into the DEA website and or as an attorney, you don't know what those red flags are, right? So I think it's extremely important for the physician to feel comfortable within his medical practice and with what he was taught and everything, and look and evaluate that patient and feel comfortable that, hey, this patient's needed. I'm going to record it. I'm going to see him every month. Every month when he comes back, How does he look? Does he look good? Does he come? How is basically his appearance, right? So that is something that it's kind of like common sense or instinct that the doctor should feel like, I don't think my patient looks good today. Maybe let me lower that amount of oxycodone or Percocet to see how he responds to that. And because pain management and DDA is trial and error, right? It's kind of like the same thing as compliance. You have to check what works, what doesn't work, to see how the patient feels comfortable, less anxiety, less pain. If I take too much, this happens. So it's a constant relationship between the physician and the patient. And it has to be that real relationship, I think, like an attorney and a client providing advice. Hey, maybe you could get some medical marijuana. Don't use that much oxycodone. Let's try half and half. Try to look for that balance and feel comfortable that basically you're doing the right thing. But so that you don't be scared, the most important thing is basically medical records and having the evidence to substantiate your reasoning of why that patient needs what I'm prescribing.
Well, so that's really good points, Juan. And with respect to fear, and Claudia, you probably noticed this with a lot of the pain patients you've dealt with. They're just simply tired of the DEA and other government entities basically sitting down between them and their physician when the physician is in the office treating the patient. Now, instead of a physician-patient interaction, you have a physician who is sitting there scared of what the DEA may think of what they do, of whether or not they're going to get fairly reimbursed for the service that they're providing, whether or not their medical records equate to the level of service that they've provided. And that whole dance that physician has to go through prevents them from sitting down and listening to the pain patients. And Claudia, my question is this: have you had some of the pain patients that you've dealt with, or maybe even yourself, feel that they're no longer having physicians listen to them as a person and listen to their problems because of all of these requirements that are put on them?
They're not treated like human beings anymore. They're treated like addicts. So you're an addict until you can prove otherwise. But there's, the doctor needs to have some level of trust in the patient. But what the DOJ has accomplished, they've instilled the fear of God, so they're not prescribing. And, after I watched that How to Fix a Drug scandal on Netflix, I had to rewatch it again. And I called you and I said, do they have a chance of winning? It's a daunting task. When you see when the DOJ puts out their press release, how they nailed the doctor. When a doctor is done, when the DOJ is done with the doctor, there's skeletal remains, and that's it. They've been robbed of their reputation. They put probably $300,000 into their education. Some of these guys have only been practicing for like 12 years, and then the raid happens. And that set the example. The government has made an example of these good doctors. And then they said, we're just not going to prescribe. Look what they did to Dr. Smithers, 40 years. And I mean, now that I know how they're charged with the weight, they're charged based on the weight of drugs. So they'll compare the weight of oxycodone, how many pills they prescribed, and they'll compare it to weed. And that Controlled Substances Act has been horribly misused. And that needs to go. I don't know. I spoke with a group of physicians in Colorado, and they had a DEA seminar, how to prescribe without going to prison. So I'm thinking after this seminar, they're going to feel invigorated and feel safe. They're like, forget it. I'm not prescribing. We all decided we're not going to prescribe.
Yeah. This is terrible. You mentioned Joel Smithers. First things first, we are on Joel Smithers' side for his case and look forward to bringing some justice to him. It's a completely pro bono project by this firm, and he's authorized me to disclose that fact. But I hope that we can do the right thing for Joel and see him released, or at a very minimum, that egregious sentence be taken care of in the Fourth Circuit. So we're looking forward to getting his appeal off the ground and fighting for him to take care of him.
We're looking, what we're looking forward to? We're looking forward to a DEA oversight hearing and a DOJ oversight hearing. And that's the next step, because it's like enough, like no more The DOJ needs to be reined in. The DEA needs to be reined in. We've got rogue cops, and I worked for the feds as a court reporter. And let me tell you, I remember being in the grand jury room with 16 highly uneducated jurors, confused by jury instructions. And when you're in a federal jury situation, it's 14 or 16 people there together for a very long time, the court reporter and an attorney like drilling it into these people's head. They did A, B, C, and D. Well, anybody will be indicted in a situation like that because we're dealing with lay people who don't know what jury instructions are. So this is very intimidating to the doctors. And when I get on the phone with doctors, I'm like, tell me about your, how are you documenting your cases? Are you doing urine drug screens every 3 months? Or are you doing them every 30 days? How many steroid injections are you, do you think you're safe because you're doing steroid injections in exchange for a very small dose of opioids? But a lot of doctors, they're like, I'm already doing way too much paperwork and I'm not getting paid. So, they're going to tack on another 3 hours of paperwork for prescribing, right? So that's like another nightmare. And then that prescribing monitor base, that's being weaponized. So that was supposed to be there to protect people. But now you terrorize the doctors with the PDMP, and you're using those controlled substances contracts against the doctor. And that was a tool that was put in place to, is the patient taking their medication? Are they not taking the medication? Well, turns out those urine drug screens are probably going to be used against the doctor. And I don't see how it's protecting anybody, but we're so far off the charts with how prescribing is happening. We have hit corruption. And just to let you know, we have filed a class action lawsuit has been filed in Rhode Island against CVS. So that's going to be made public record. I probably spilled the beans, but I don't care.
And let me say something. We didn't have an issue with overprescribing controlled substances or people dying until the FDA, being lobbied by Purdue Pharma, changed the rules and regulations for what that oxycodone was going to be used. That's basically what triggered everything, right? So that move basically was the thing that jeopardized the entire good people and the pain management community because of that change, right? Another thing I was going to say before, when I spoke a little bit about double jeopardy, is the position that physicians are, even if they don't get charged. If you get an investigation or a subpoena or a search warrant or a CID or whatever it may be for records, if it's from the DEA, that's going to trigger a licensing investigation. That could trigger an investigation by Medicare. They want to put you in the OIG exclusion list if something happened. The DEA obviously wants to remove your DEA certification. Insurance plans basically learn from that. So even if you don't even get indicted, the physician has to spend so much money because each of those agencies are separate agencies and separate administrative process, which is extremely unfair. So I'll say that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Juan. And Claudia, in terms of looking forward, I know that you mentioned that there's a class action lawsuit and there's some legislation that you're fostering to get out there. But our role as attorneys, and the one thing that we can do, unless we decide to be obvious, is to plain old-fashioned win in court, right? And there's nothing that will be a more powerful signal to the DEA breaking in this new administrator by litigating hard against him and having him realize that he's not immune from overturned appellate decisions. Winning against the DOJ in the courtroom, which is something we've been blessed and able to do on behalf of doctors. But if we do two things, I think that we can right this ship. Number one, remove the fear by getting doctors good compliance programs so that they're not running outside of the pack and they're running in the pack. Because the DEA is going and picking off all of those doctors who are out on the fringe, prescribing certain ways. And it's not our desire that doctors stop treating pain patients. It's our desire and our attempt to get them treating them in a way that keeps them inside the pack of core physicians while effectively handling a population of pain patients. So get compliance, keep them inside the pack. And then those folks that are unnecessarily targeted, the most aggressive legal defense possible by attorneys who know how to actually defend doctors, right? and who know how to win in court and who know where the evidence is and where to look. The one most single damaging thing to pain patients and physicians, I believe, has been crappy defense attorneys who don't know what they're doing. I'm going to be honest.
Absolutely. I hear the cases and I'm like, well, how many doctors has this lawyer represented? None. I said, you hired a lawyer to represent everything you've ever worked for, and this lawyer's never represented a doctor? Like, these aren't healthcare doctors? No. So now I reach out to these doctors. Who's your lawyer? Oh, my cousin Vinny. No, you don't need, no, not my cousin Vinny. No, you know, and when I talk with them about compliance, they're usually silent and they'll say, well, I already do all of that. Okay, well, then you should be okay. But it's not only the, you know, the DEA, they're so afraid of their state's medical boards. So if I was a healthcare defense attorney, I would be hosting seminars for these attorneys. You know, they always want, how much? I don't know how much. How much is Ron Chapman charge? How much should, you know, how much is compliance? I don't know, but I would host how to prescribe safely. You know, I would host sessions maybe 2 times a year after COVID. Like, let's resurrect the pain management practice. Let's get these patients in a good place. Most importantly, let's get the physicians in a good place where they can sleep at night and not have nightmares that 40 DEA agents are barreling in their office, which, can I just say, how stupid is that? I mean, Joel Smithers is doing more time than cartel members, but it's, you know, it's scary. It's a daunting task, but I'm confident. You know, we had this problem 20 years ago when we were living in an underprescribed nation, and then some doctors blamed the 5th vital sign on the opioid crisis. Well, that's just silly, because we're at an all-time low of prescribing, and we're going to hit some serious overdose skyrocketing over the next 6 months. It's going to be bad for this country. People were never overdosing on, or they haven't been for quite some time, on prescription pain medication. You know, in Rhode Island, 2018, 366 overdoses. All of them had one thing in common: illicit substances, heroin, fentanyl. So and I think, you know, because I'm in the smallest state in the country, when I get called to advocate for a lawmaker, I was like, well, you know, nobody overdosed. It's, you know, it's just not happening. So we've targeted the wrong substance, and now we're pushing the overdoses to increase. So, you know, I tell my doctors, please get some compliance in your office. What's going to make you feel comfortable? Let's get a lawyer out there to see you so you can prescribe safely, follow protocol. And even if you don't agree with the protocol, just do it, or don't stay in pain management.
Claudia, I got some good news because Ron, the second, Ron Sr. and I, we both have masters in health law, which are called LLMs, and all of them from Loyola University. That was a coincidence. But we've been meeting probably a year or 6 months, and we created a company called Chapman Consulting Group for this exact same reason. We want to go and provide seminars. We want to do books. We want a compliance program for physicians, compliance program for pain management, for pharmacies. We already created this company, and we'll be coming soon, you know, doing podcasts, seminars, etc. So that's going to be great for the doctors, because at the end of the day, 90% of my clients want to do the right thing, right? Is that they didn't know, you know, they didn't know that they had to do X or they had to do Y. So we are in that process of obviously creating this type of you know, giving this information to the doctor in a more direct manner, so they don't have to feel afraid of issuing prescriptions. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you very much, Juan. I appreciate that. And Claudia, I just have one final but sort of big question. What can we do for your constituents as a law firm, as attorneys, as people engaged in the healthcare industry, to help understand what they're going through and help prevent, you know, these further harms and abuses?
So I think, you know, I know when the patient sits down with their doctor, they're always afraid to reveal too much. But what I think is a good start for the pain patients, having this discussion with the physicians, and this is something very small, is having a one-page, just a pamphlet to give to the doctors and say, I'm just going to leave this here for you, doctor. You know, we're supporting providers, and we're just trying to bring the legal community together with the provider so the pain patient can continue to receive access to pain medication. Something like a small flyer, that's how the Don't Punish Pain rally movement was stoked, was by flyers. I don't know how I have over 10,000 people today. I don't know how this happened, but that's how doctors found me, as well as through their patients, through the rally. So if it starts with just a one-page flyer, Chapman Law Group is providing a webinar regarding prescribing safely. It's hosted by advocates. Sometimes an advocate can make a big difference between a doctor and a lawyer.
Yeah.
I see it all the time. There's that, they feel like they're almost protected from, I don't want to say from the lawyer, but that's kind of how it is.
Yeah, information and accessibility sounds like what they need, something that will help them remove the fear, but also not be couched in a way that may make them think that there's huge legal price tags associated with it, or a lot of redundant information that they've already gotten before. But something
absolutely,
common.
Yeah. I feel that's the first question. How much?
Yeah,
I don't know how much. How much?
And
how much?
I will end up in this, at least on my side. The doctor and the physician community and or people, because in Florida, you don't have to be a doctor to own a pain management clinic, but they have to basically realize that compliance is an insurance, okay? The more you invest now, the more you're gonna save later. Because when the DEA comes in, if they issue a search warrant and you are basically following our rules and regulations, they will review the records and they will leave you alone. Maybe you have to hire us, but it probably won't be that much, because once we review the records, we send a letter to them, there's no issue here. So always realize that investing in compliance is part of the expenses of you running a clinic, a pain management clinic. So that's extremely important. And look at compliance again as insurance. Less you pay now, you save later.
Yeah, could you imagine? And anybody operating in a highly regulated industry needs to be prepared for compliance. Could you imagine an airline not investing in FAA compliance council, right? Or a manufacturing company not investing in compliance for its products so it can understand and know that those products are coming off the market safe. That's just how the world works these days. Compliance is key, and you've got to make sure you comply. But it seems that many of the physicians around the country have lacked information on how to comply, because some federal agencies have kept that very secret, right? Whereas
because it varies from state to state. You know, those are guidelines, but those CDC guidelines have been turned into law. And it's now, you know, in Oregon, well, it's the CDC guidelines, well, we're going to change it to 60 and to 60 morphine. And then in Vermont and New Hampshire, 30. No, this was not supposed to happen. And here's the thing. The state medical boards knew this was going to happen. All of the Department of Health, they knew this was going to happen, but there's so much money to be made in medication addiction treatment, MAT programs, that nobody cares, because there's billions to be made in addiction and nothing to be made in chronic pain. But, you know, and I tell my doctors, look, be honest with me. If you're honest with me, I'll respect you. But when I get some of the doctors on the phone and they tout, well, I'm a non-opioid anesthesiologist. Well, go cut hair then. You shouldn't be an anesthesiologist.
Yeah, right.
You know, and we're having non-opioid hip replacements. Well, then I'm not having a hip replacement. And I'll tell you what, I'm effective. And I've talked thousands of patients out of surgery. Don't do it, because you will be left for dead. Think about that surgery. But I was just contacted by a woman. The palliative care team came in the hospital. She just had a colostomy bag put on, a very painful procedure. And they offered her Suboxone as post-op. She's never taken, you know, she takes pain medication, but for a surgery like that, and I've had it, I said, excuse me, Suboxone for post-op pain? And I got on the phone and I said, this is going to be a young team of palliative care doctors, because it's what they're learning. Suboxone? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
So It's bad. It's very scary. And the thing about it is, it could happen to anybody in a blink of an eye. You're one car accident away from, God forbid, you know, I never knew how common it was for people to fall in elevator shafts. Just really crazy things. But my illness, I inherited from my dad, and now my daughter has it. So it's elderly. Everybody is affected. And I have an expression, you're not affected until you're affected. And, you know,
Yep.
doctors, let's get that compliance in place, and, you know, let's fight back. And we're doing it. We really are. We're winning. It's going to take a while.
And Claudia, I was going to say for your listeners, compliance is not rocket science. Compliance, which are issued by the OIG guidelines, it's basically having policies and procedures in place, right? Setting a vision, a culture of what you want your company to be, right? And past that vision, that's those standards, all of that auditing and monitoring, training your nurses, training your employees. It's basically what you do every day. You have to document it and implement it through all the organization. The compliance program, so that doctors are not scared, it's in there to find mistakes. That's what the compliance is all about. If nobody makes any mistake, then you don't need any compliance program. So it's always evolving, and you will find that they make mistakes. What the government is looking for, what we want as attorneys, is for you to respond in case there's a violation, right? A nurse took up a legal prescription pad of the doctor. Hey, you have to fire that nurse. So compliance is not that complicated. I don't want physicians to be afraid of compliance. It's that you have to be aware. Your administrator, supervise, oversight, your billing, your records. So it's something that you basically have to do to run a clinic, but that you have to document and pass that information, that training, that auditing, how to do it to your employees and your patients.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Compliance is key. Well, listen, Claudia, thank you so much for joining us on this call, for talking to us about your constituents, about pain patients, and giving us their perspective. When's the next rally scheduled?
October 7th.
Great.
So we're going to try and have, believe it or not, this time we're going to try and have lawyers at the rallies.
Where is it?
There's going to be a lot of doctors at the, you know, in Miami, I think we're rallying at the DEA headquarters.
In Weston.
Yeah.
Oh, it's in Weston. No, I got it.
Yeah. And we just, you know, sometimes the rallies only have a very, you know, some rallies have 10 people, some rallies have 60. These are sick people. So a lot of them have rare diseases. They're in wheelchairs. So, you know, if you need an advocate, you can find one at the doctor-patient forum. And if you just want to get out there to be seen, be heard, whether it's, you know, the doctors, the patients together, you know, visit us on Facebook at Don't Punish Pain Rally. You'll see my face like once a month coming on. And, you know, I got to keep people motivated, and I do what I can.
Well, Claudia, we'd love to have a number of attorneys at quite a few of those rallies, wherever we may be able to get people out there. So bring a few extra microphones for us, or bullhorns, and we'll help out with the rallying. In the meantime, we'll keep trying to win for those physicians and keep trying to keep them compliant. Again,
Yes.
thank you so much for all of your time today. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for helping pain patients. Thank you for connecting with doctors. Just thank you for all of it. You're a very powerful voice in the community. And we're so grateful that doctors have you, that pain patients have you, and that you're out there doing what you do. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Everybody stay healthy. All right.
Bye.
Bye.